Most animated films are made with children in mind, so their plot and storytelling techniques have to be pretty easy to understand for the young minds. But there are some animated films, whether for kids or not, that are just downright confusing at first. It's only later, once we've had time to analyze the content, that we realize the film was pretty smart. Before we count them down, though, be sure to click on that subscribe button to stay up to date with everything Screen Rant. Can you guess which film these emojis represent? Stay tuned for the answer. Ghost in the Shell. While there may have been a live-action adaptation that hit the big screen in 2017, many fans will remember the animated version of the acclaimed adaptation of the Japanese manga. If you're unfamiliar with Ghost in the Shell, it can get pretty darn confusing. It's no surprise then that the film was a key inspiration for The Matrix, and we all know that film was pretty confusing at first.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
In Ghost in the Shell, we follow the Major, a humanoid cyborg who is the head of security in Sector 9. The film is full of political debate, scientific theory, and enough philosophy to satisfy their college thesis. Trying to explain what Ghost in the Shell is, in a nutshell, is pretty complicated, since the film tackles everything from the soul, technology, and gender. While all this is going on, though, there is a simple yet brilliant plot unfolding. Major Kusanagi, along with her partner, are tasked with hunting down a brilliant hacker known as the Puppet Master, who has the ability to hack one's mind thanks to the cyber brains of the future.
Whoa.
Of course, while the investigation plays out, there's enough going on that the simple storyline may seem confusing to the average viewer.
It's okay, troops. The anti-gravity sickness will wear off momentarily. Now, let's move!
Toy Story 2. Pixar's hit film Toy Story 2 is considered by fans and critics alike to be one of the best sequels ever made and certainly one of the best animated films of our time. Surprisingly, the film was originally going to be released straight to DVD, but in the end, the powers that be pushed for the film to be released theatrically, and boy, we sure are glad about that. While Toy Story 2 is definitely a film made with families and children in mind, there are some confusing undertones in the movie. Mainly, why on earth does Woody want to stay behind with Jessie, Stinky Pete, and Bullseye, especially after working so hard to get back to Andy during the events of the first film?
Stop this nonsense and let's go.
Buzz. I can't go.
Despite being one of Andy's favorite toys, he understood that he could be of more help to the other Woody-related toys if he were to stay behind and become part of a museum set. While it initially pained him, he thought he was doing the right thing. Of course, a toy isn't meant to be kept behind glass, and Woody snaps back and hatches a plan to get back to Andy's with some new friends.
The ancient cactus root. I believe your people use it as seasoning when preparing your native dishes.
Also natural laxative.
Rango. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas was confusing and trippy enough to begin with, but take that concept and turn it into an animated feature for kids, well, that's uncharted territory right there. Johnny Depp reunites with Pirates of the Caribbean director Gore Verbinski to give us this animated film that may not be as confusing as you might remember. What parents and unsuspecting moviegoers might remember about Rango is how the film was marketed. What came off as a traditional family adventure was clearly anything but. While it was still appropriate for kids, we're sure many young ones were dazed and confused with this one, as it came off more as an artsy avant-garde film than family-friendly comedy. The film is littered with references to adult neo-noir and Western films, including Fear and Loathing and The Good, The Bad, and the Ugly, among others. But in the end, Rango was about a chameleon that helped a small town get their water back from the bad guys. Straight up classic Western disguised as an animated film for kids. The film may have told its story in a colorful and trippy way, but in the end, the simple story was right there under your nose.
My pride is shaping the future.
Final Fantasy 15. Those who played the highly anticipated game Final Fantasy 15 might have noticed that some key moments seemed to happen off-screen or that some important information was nowhere to be found in the game. That's because part of the information was missing and could be found in two side projects leading up to the game's release. One of the projects was a CG animated film called Kingsglaive, which starred Aaron Paul, Sean Bean, and Lena Headey in the English dub. Kingsglaive is confusing for two reasons, one being that it's so heavily tied to the plot of the game, and another for it being a pretty convoluted story. We follow Nyx, a member of the Kingsglaive, which is essentially the royal guard who are also able to use magical powers. There is a ton of backstory here that doesn't always get presented in the cleanest of fashion, so we're left wondering who's who, what's going on, and why for a good chunk of the film. But once you strip away the lore, the fancy names, and the ties to the game, the film is actually pretty straightforward. A bodyguard must protect the king and his son's betrothed from assassins and a treacherous invading empire who seek the throne. That's pretty much it. We're not really sure why the movie had to go and make it all complicated.
Ha! What have we here?
The Jungle Book. If you stop and think about it, The Jungle Book can be especially confusing for a child. While the classic songs, fun characters, and exotic locations make for a fun film, many younger minds may have been lost as to why Shere Khan had it out for Mowgli and none of the other animals. Surely there's more meat on their bones than scrawny little Mowgli, isn't there?
Oh, I say.
While that's likely true, there is a more logical explanation for Khan's behavior. This is developed further in the Jon Favreau remake that came out in 2016, but Khan is terrified of humans. Not because we're scary people that go bump in the night, but rather he sees the terrible things that we've done to the ecosystem. Deforestation and overhunting have led species like the Bengal tiger to reach near extinction, and Khan sees Mowgli as a future threat. All he wants to do is keep the ecosystem in check and ensure nothing bad happens to it. Is he a terrifying monster in the process? You bet. But of all the villains out there, Khan's reasoning is pretty understandable.
I get the point.
We'd be pretty angry too if we lost our homes and ended up with a vicious scar across our faces. Not cool. Batman, The Killing Joke. The ending of Batman: The Killing Joke was always a bit ambiguous, whether it was the animated film that came out in 2016 or the beloved graphic novel penned by Alan Moore. In both interpretations, Joker finally goes too far and breaks Batman, potentially causing the Caped Crusader to crack too much and ultimately take the life of the Joker by the finale. But this is Batman. He can't break his own rule, especially against the Joker. What's going on here? Well, if you've only seen the animated film, you may be left a bit confused. Over the years in the graphic novels, the Joker has repeatedly antagonized the Dark Knight, yet despite all the wrongdoings, Batman keeps to his rule, refusing to take out the Joker, resorting to throwing him in Arkham Asylum again, which, as we know, doesn't seem like the best place for the Clown Prince. With all that going on, plus the events of The Killing Joke, which saw the Joker doing some pretty terrible things to the Gordons, and Batman finally understood there's only one way to stop the mayhem. He may be Batman, but in the end, everyone has a breaking point, and the Joker finally brought Batman down to his level. Akira. Even if you've never seen or heard of Akira before, you've likely seen other films that reference it. Visually speaking, the red motorcycle that belongs to Kaneda stands as one of the most iconic images from pop culture and anime in general. At the 2017 San Diego Comic-Con, the trailer for Ready Player One was released and fans were able to pick out the red motorcycle reference in that trailer amidst the countless other Easter eggs. Red bikes aside though, Akira is not the most accessible film ever made. It's a film about a motorcycle gang, led by Kaneda and his red bike as they traverse a dystopian future. Kaneda's best friend ends up getting superpowers after an accident and things go horribly wrong from there. That's the simplified version of the plot, by the way. What makes Akira so confusing for newcomers is the world that it inhabits. There are gangs, psychics, government labs, all operating against the backdrop of an ongoing rebellion in Neo-Tokyo. All this takes place as we learn more and more about Akira, a psychic who is so powerful he destroyed the first Tokyo and how he ties to Kaneda's powerful friend. Yeah, we totally understand if it takes a few sittings to understand Akira, but seriously watch it, it's amazing. Princess Mononoke. Director Hayao Miyazaki is considered to be one of the best directors of all time. His films are considered by fans and critics alike as classics and have done quite well for themselves in North America despite being Japanese productions. Princess Mononoke can arguably be seen as the most serious and adult film in his filmography, and despite the fantastical elements present in all of his films, there are certain points in Mononoke that can be a bit confusing at first. The film follows an exiled prince named Ashitaka as he searches for a cure for his cursed arm. The curse was bestowed upon him while defending his village from a demon who was infected with coal from the mines far away. He eventually makes his way to Irontown, an industrial powerhouse that's ultimately killing the surrounding forest for their enterprise. For those who are younger or perhaps haven't reached a level of maturity, the events of Mononoke might seem more confusing. Despite the fact that there are gods and magical creatures in the film's interpretation of Japan, the film's metaphors about industrialization and deforestation become clearer the more often you watch it. Killing the spirit of the forest is a destructive idea and can have permanent consequences. Once you take away the fantastical elements, there's a wonderfully human story to be found here that's relevant today.
Hey Rango, I've just had the strangest dream.
Yellow Submarine. How do you even describe the Yellow Submarine? Fans of the Beatles might have the answer if they've spent some time with Lucy, who's in the sky with diamonds, but casual moviegoers were left confused as to what exactly is going on in this extra trippy and confusing animated flick. Despite being a film based on the lyrics of the Beatles and starring the Fab Four as themselves, the film is actually a fantasy film set in the wondrous world of Pepperland. Things definitely get weird in this movie as there are Aztec pyramids, evil minions called blue meanies, magic, and the titular Yellow Submarine. While kids and some adults might be extremely confused with all the colorful shenanigans happening on screen, one can actually find a simple fantasy tale once they look beyond the obvious trippy inspirations. There are bad guys who are trying to suppress music in a land that encourages music and creativity. They enlist artists to fight back against those who want to suppress artistic expression. We just find it hysterical that the antagonists are called Blue Meanies and live in the Blue Mountains. Aside from its fun soundtrack and Beatles license, the art style in the film is surprisingly well done, and Pixar Mastermind even called the film revolutionary, so maybe give this one a chance.
More people than you'd think, and more people each day. This is a world getting progressively worse. Can we not agree on that?
A Scanner Darkly. Directed by Richard Linklater of Boyhood and School of Rock fame, A Scanner Darkly is based off of a book by Philip K. Dick, the guy who wrote the original novel for Blade Runner. With that in mind, you know things are going to be trippy and complicated from the get-go. The film stars Keanu Reeves, Robert Downey Jr., Winona Ryder, and Woody Harrelson in cel-shaded versions of themselves.
You're kidding me.
No. Yes, but no.
In the film's version of reality, the United States has lost the war on drugs, and as a result, various kinds of products have infiltrated the streets. One such piece of merchandise, Substance D, causes some pretty wacky trips as a result. To combat the widespread addiction, new invasive privacy measures were put in place to record every single move that one makes. Couple that with Keanu's character suffering with his brain fighting itself, and you have one heck of a trippy movie. But when you break it down, the film isn't that complicated. Take away the sci-fi elements, including a scramble suit that changes one's appearance, and the film is actually a simple undercover sting operation. Keanu's undercover agent simply wants to buy enough product to build a case, yet that's only the tip of the iceberg with this unique animated film. Well, that's it for now, everyone. Which animated film have you always thought was confusing, only to see a smart explanation for the confusion later on in life? Is there an animated film that still confuses you to this day? Let us know in the comments. We're dying to know, and be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. That way you'll get all the latest content added straight to your playlist. Thanks for watching. Did you guess the following as your answer to our emoji question? If you did, you're right. Thanks for playing.